Welcome to What is Going On in the UC, and today we're going to talk about obedience. Okay, what is obedience? Well, everybody knows what obedience is. Somebody that you respect or supposed to respect, somebody who's in authority or who has leverage over you, gives you a command and you comply. You follow through with the command. That's obedience, right? But what I want to talk about is obedience in relation to God's will, godly life, godly living, God's providence, the way of so-called good people or people who serve God or people who are in the church. That kind of obedience. Here's some things that we have to rule out. We know that obedience cannot be slave-like when we are supposed to be raised up to the level of holy sons and daughters. You only have to search yourself for the definition of son or holy son to realize that obedience in a certain sense, especially to the free thinker, just does not compute, right? What is it about obedience? One thing about obedience is the intellectual part of obedience. Do you understand the commands or the suggestion being given to you? The other part of obedience is how you feel about it. The third part of obedience, the one that typically seems to matter in the end, is whether or not you comply. You know, what you do. Most people that I know think of obedience in terms of it not mattering how you get to the end result as long as you comply in the end. This is a very disrespectful way of thinking about obedience. It truly subordinates the person to sort of like a slave, really, right? Sort of like a slave to a commander, right? Like the commander himself wouldn't care how the servant felt as long as the commander got compliance, right? Do we serve such a God? Even the fact that we might think we serve such a God is an Old Testament mindset. Another kind of obedience is you don't feel good about it, but you understand that the commander needs it to be done, so you're willing to sacrifice something that's valuable to you in order to comply in the end. That's another way of looking at obedience. We've all heard about that third option, that God wants your heart. He wants you to obey out of love because you love Him. And the reason why we love God is because we perceive how much He has been loving us. And so our obedience is a natural response to finding out that God needs something or desires something from us. So we comply because we love God and we really appreciate God. If we comply because we have reason, because our intellect can see some value in it, or if we just comply because we honor the relationship that we have with the Lord and we have this emotional connection, still something is missing. So when we talk about a certain kind of obedience, the obedience of holy sons and daughters, we are talking about absolute obedience. And absolute obedience is not missing the emotional reason and the intellectual reason. It is not immature. Absolute obedience comes as a result of knowing the mind of God, which is absolute faith. Absolute faith and absolute love. That means the ability to passionately value things and people the way that God does. Living for the sake not only of the other, but for the sake of the kingdom. Absolute obedience comes about when we have absolute faith and absolute love. So if you feel like you don't understand providence, then the only type of obedience you're capable of mustering is to just say, I do it because I love you. But when you understand providence even more, your desire will grow even more. So people who know providence and have that kind of passionate love for God and humanity and that kind of desire for the kingdom to come, not only can they practice absolute obedience, but when they do, oh my God, they move heaven and earth. Anyway, just food for thought. If you like this, like, share, subscribe. Talk to you later.